So I want to turn back and look at the dream and Jacob's response to it. They said that Jacob set out for Haran. That's how the portion begins. He left Beersheba and set out for Haran, which is not the usual framing of a journey. Usually it's the person who is about to go out on a journey would lift up their eyes to see where they're going. That's how the Akedah begins. That's how Eliezer, the servant's journey begins, and further and other ones. But here, this is not only that kind of journey, but it's also, he's setting out physically. That is clear. And he comes upon a certain place, Makom. This Makom, as Robert Alter points out, is, I said before, is repeated 6 times. But it's important to understand what the Makom here means, that this anonymous place, this place without a name that could be anywhere, turns into Bethel, a place of vision, a place of God. And I think it's one of the most powerful ideas about Jacob that he demonstrates for us. The idea that we have the power to transform a place, some ordinary random place, a makom, into one of divine vision, but also one that has potential, sacred potential to be something far more than what it might appear to be. And I think, we have the potential to see this all the time in our lives, something that appears ordinary, run-of-the-mill. Our experience of it with an open mind might change it. And I've talked about this many times, but growing up at Camp Ramah, we did this every single day, often 3 times a day. There was only one synagogue at Camp Ramah in Wisconsin, but there's many different units, and they all would daven in a different place. So in the morning, we would turn around the aron from the dance room or from the music room or from the drama room and turn that into a Beit Knesset, into a house of prayer. And, the message was too subtle for us as kids, but it's something that I think about all the time, that any space has potential to be a space where you can make community. And I mean community with a capital C, where you can create something that is far greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that is a weakness with the conservative movement, that we have turned the synagogue into the only place where we pray. Certainly when there's a shiva, we pray in someone's home. But for the most part, services in the conservative movement has been turned into something that happens on Saturday mornings in one location. And that's certainly powerful for the idea of community and enhances the experience or the importance of Shabbat. But I think it minimizes the sense of where we can find and where we can meet something that has divine significance. So that's one thing I've been thinking about. The other part is how powerful Jacob's response to it is. The first was, God was in this place and I did not know it. That's beautiful. But I want to look at his vow. If you have your Chumash, you can read along with me on page 168. Jacob then made a vow, saying, if God remains with me, if he protects me on this journey that I'm making and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to my father's house, the Lord shall be my God. And he took the stone that had been his pillow, and he used that to turn, and he turned that stone into an altar. This is who he is. This is Jacob. This is really the theological or the psychological version of the physical wrestling that he'll do in next week's portion with the Ish, with the man who may be an angel or might not be. He's wrestling here with his identity. In last week's portion, he wrestled to get the birthright. He really wrestled to get the blessing when he responded to Rebecca, when Rebecca said to him, dress up like your brother. And he says, what if he knows? What if he knows? What if his father knows that it's not him? He's always wrestling with the reality around him. Nothing is ever black and white with Jacob. Ramban, among many other commentators, point out that the if, is not conditional, but that this is just the way you speak about the future. It's not, as Stephen and Bob said, and I agree with, it's not him hedging his bets about if this vow will come true, but it's really, this is just how you speak to things that have yet to happen. But for me, I see it as his version of the Chaya Sarah moment. Chaya Sarah, the portion where Abraham buries his wife Sarah, to me is the moment where Abraham becomes a humble and more human-like figure. He recognizes his failures in the past and negotiates with the Hittites for a burial plot, not as the ultimate elite, the one who God has touched, but as a human being, a ger, a refugee, as someone without claim to the land that God has promised him. And I feel like this is when Jacob is no longer the deceptive, clever Jacob that we meet last week, but one who is experiencing vulnerability, and that vulnerability has caused reflection. You know, this vow is so real. Where is Jacob right now? He has fled his home. He has nothing but the clothes that he wears on his back. He is literally between a rock and a hard place. He uses the rock that he finds, the only thing that he can find in this random spot, as a pillow, and he goes to sleep out in the wilderness, no claim to the land that he's in, no ability to return home. And as you know, he never really will be with his family ever again. His mom sends him to find a mate, but he doesn't know where he's going. And it's in this moment that we see a very real, very human Jacob, full of fear of the unknown. And that's what animates his blessing. He's not asking for the wealth that his uncle will crave, or for really the spiritual potential that his grandfather sets out on his journey for. He just wants bread to eat, clothes to wear, and the promise, the idea that he'll return to be with his family. And I think it's important that he points out his father didn't leave under the best of terms with his father. And at the end, he uses the unique description when he's talking to Lavan, the pachad of Yitzchak, the fear of his father, instead of, as he did for Jacob, Abraham, the God of Abraham. And there's a lot of reasons that he could be pointing out this fear, but I think it's fear that animates this entire journey, his experience of being the ultimate person without a home here. And we read this portion every year at this time, and it's the perfect time to be reading this portion as it is on this exact day. I walked here. It was snowing, sleeting, whatever you call that. It's a time of fear. We're moving into the winter, and it's wonderful that we put up the love fridge this week. I don't know if anyone has had the chance to see it. I have been peering out of my office to see it, and it's really just an unbelievable thing to see people go in and take food and to put food in there, that we are helping make this time of fear and difficulty a little bit less difficult. And I was really thinking of this time of fear and difficulty. Yesterday, I was on a call with other members of the Hyde Park Kenwood Interfaith Council to talk about what we as a faith community, what response we can offer to the uptick in violence that has come to Hyde Park and not just in the surrounding neighborhoods. And I think one thing that I took from that call, and one thing that I want us to use Jacob as a reference point too, is as we are the inheritors of his namesake, is to think about the vulnerability of others, the fear that all right, enough of this. The fear that characterizes the lives of those around us. Jacob, in his moment of vulnerability, was finally able to see how his actions affect other people. and he was no longer only living for himself. And I think we see that in how he worked and lived with Lavan and how he was as, at least as a husband in the beginning. We need to, I have no idea what the response to police, to violence and to the uptick in it. But I know that one response that we cannot have is to turn inward and to be more fearful because now the violence is in our community. We need to continue to see the others and not just be more concerned because our lives might be in a greater sense of vulnerability, but that this vulnerability is how other people live all the time. And this might not be such a coherent comparison and message, but the vulnerability that characterizes Jacob's journey here, which allows for him to meet the divine and to see how this one place that was just an ordinary place with no road marker next to it becomes the ultimate place where God is to be found. It is to teach us to be able to have the vulnerability to see others, and not only in how it affects us, but the vulnerability that surrounds us and how we can use our care and sensitivity to be more aware of that plight. We will turn to Musaf. Shabbat Shalom. I will head upstairs